Okay, so we are ready to start tying on. We've done the threading and we've done the slaying. I've got 2 videos of those on the channel now if you want to look into them. There's no talking, no explanations. It's pretty self-explanatory when it comes to those 2 things. And we have passed basically all of the threads, well, all of the threads, not basically all of them, through the loom, all the way from the back, which you can't see, through the heddles and the shafts, through the reed and the beater, which you can see here. And all that's left is to actually attach them on the other end to the loom and start weaving. So you can see that the little bit of setup that I've done here is I have brought my tie-on rod around and underneath the breast beam and then up on top of it. So you want to think about the path that your fabric is going to follow. You want it to go over the breast beam, down and under, and then get rolled onto your fabric beam. So that's the way that the tie-on rod, the apron rod, is going to travel as well. You can see I've started here. I've got both sides done and one in the middle. I like to start with one in the middle just to pick that tie-on rod up so that it hangs and is easier to manipulate as I'm doing the rest. And then I go from outside in. There's really no wrong way to tie on. You can use whatever knots that you want. You want to get really fancy, you can. I do, I think, what is fairly usual, which is called a lark's head, actually. Wait, is it a lark's head? I think it's a lark's head. I know a lot of people call it a weaving knot or a weaver's knot. So I'll show you how to do that. All you do is pick up a bout. These bouts are 1 inch wide, 24 ends, 24 threads. You can tie it on just like this. You could actually tie 2 of them on together like that. But you can see that if you do that, you have a long triangle of area where there's no threads. And then you'd have to basically sacrifice a lot of that in order to spread the warp so that you can weave on it. So there's 2 different spreadings. There's one at the beginning when you first put it onto the back, and then there's one when you first start weaving. In order to really eliminate that waste, I like to do something that I picked up in a video that I watched a long time ago, a couple years, not a long time, but a couple of years ago when I first started weaving. And she suggests that you do smaller bouts when you tie on, because then you don't have to worry about spreading the warp as much. So I like to do about 1/2 inches. So I'll go ahead and split this 1 inch bout into 2, drop it, and then split this 1/2 inch bout into 2 as well. So now I've got 2 sets of threads, and the way you tie on, the way I tie on, is pull it nice and tight so you know there's no tangles. Then go over the tie-on rod, under and up. Then I like to let it go slack completely, and then just snug it up a little bit. And then you're going to tie it on top of the tie-on rod and move the tails over so they don't get in the way when you do the next one. When you're tying on, it doesn't need to be taut. It doesn't need to be under tension. You're going to add the tension with your loom. There's no reason to tie it on super tight, especially not the first knot. We're going to come back through and put a second set of knots on top. So at that point, you can give it a nice snug, but I like to do it nice and loose the first time. Another thing I'd like to mention is that weaving and weavers are absolutely not perfect. And that's totally okay. So you can see here that my threads are not all the exact same length. Even though I wound them on a warping board, a warping mill, and I cut them all roughly at the same spot, they're not perfect. And that's okay. No one's going to go looking at the ends of my my bouts and saying, oh, you have 3 millimeters longer on that one, and so therefore your fabric is complete trash. Not going to happen. As long as my tension is fairly consistent, doesn't really matter how long every single one is. Now, it is definitely easier to get a better tension when you have roughly the same length of threads, but you don't have to be perfect. My favorite saying in the world is, perfect is the enemy of good. I try to apply that in everything I do, and weaving is no different. So, and you can see this one actually, I did a little bit too wide, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. In the end, it'll all be fabric. So nobody's gonna look at my blanket and say, oh, well, I can tell that your bouts weren't even when you put it on. That's not possible. So it's really not a big deal. All right, so here I am. All right. I don't like to do all of one side and then the other. I find that does tend to pull the apron rod in one way or the other around this central one. So I'll do a handful over here. I don't know how many I did, maybe 6 or 7 half inches. That's like 2 or 3 inches, 3 or 4 inches, something like that. Then I will shift over to this side. I use a spinning chair for my loom, so I don't get to slide over like some of those loom benches do. And I'll just keep doing the same thing. This is another one of those parts of weaving that's super meditative. So you can see too here, I've got this little piece of thread. It's actually Texsolve rope. And it holds my 2 rods. I have an apron rod and a tie-on rod. The apron rod is attached to the loom directly, and the tie-on rod is tied onto the apron rod. It's what I tie onto, so there's 2 tie-ons. And I have the Texsolve rope here, just keeping it at the same distance across. It's a little tricky if you're trying to, go in there, you kind of run into it. So again, not a big deal, just kind of make it work. And then I scooch it over, give it a snug, and I'm done. I do try to keep my bouts fairly straight, parallel to the sides of the loom, just because then I know that I'm going to have enough room. If you tie several of them on like this, then the next time you come in here, you're going to have to move it over anyway, so there you go. Great, and I will speed through the rest of this and get back to you in a minute.